I've got this Dell PowerEdge T20 here, and I'm just going to do a bit of a teardown on it because I need to strip it down anyway. I need to take out the motherboard and power supply, maybe some of the other bits. So I thought it might be worth having a bit of a quick look at it before I do that. I bought this case for a particular reason, which I'll perhaps go into the details of later, mainly because of the way that it's constructed. I also quite like with this, the front part, you've got this great big grill for an air intake, which is, I think that's quite good for what I want to do. It's ideal. I'm not really interested in having drive bays or anything. I mean, there's an optical drive bay slot here that you can take out and put an optical bay, or you can put an optical drive in there, but I'm not particularly interested in doing that either. One thing I noticed about this, the styling of this at the bottom here, there's this sort of wedge that's missing, this sort of inset here. Didn't like that at first, but I think they've done that for a reason. So this is the underside and this is the front here, and a lot of cases will have like a slot along the front just to allow a little bit more airflow into the case. There's a tendency to grab them there, and what can happen when you pick them up is you end up with just a plastic fascia in your hand and a broken toe because the rest of the PC's landed on your foot. And I think what they've done here, there's like an indentation in the metalwork, so I think the idea is you can grab that with one hand as you're carrying it, and I think this is why they've, maybe it's not, maybe just style, but definitely that kind of encourages you to grab that bit rather than that bit, which I thought was quite an interesting idea. So this case would be ideal for what I want to achieve because it's got fairly flat sides, and from the pictures I've looked at, internally it's got the potential to be chopped about and then reassembled together again, re-riveted back together, and achieve the result that I want. But what I'll probably do is a separate video on that once I've got all this stripped out, and sort of assess if it's going to be a viable option or not. And if it looks like it's viable, then I'll give it a go. I mean, it doesn't mean it's going to work, but we'll see what happens with that. So with these particular cases, you have these release levers, and you pull that up, and then I was actually trying to slide this panel that way, so off the back, but it doesn't work like that. You actually lift it up, and they've got some hooks in them. These hooks here, and they're released by the lever operates this mechanism. That operates this mechanism here at the top, which slides some bits that then release the hooks from these little slots along the top. So that's how that works. It's quite a nice touch with this case, is they've got a nice quality. It's like it's not papery sticker. This is like you get in a server, a nice thick plastic diagram of where everything is and what it is. So it's quite a nice little touch, that, how to install all the different drives and things. A lot of these Dell systems, you've got the usual just toolless removable drive racks, and they've got these rubberized mounts on them. Another thing that a lot of, well, most systems are like that now. And then this has got an additional option for 2 more drives up here. I think this rack may be removable altogether. I think if you take the front panel out, you've got your removable things here, but obviously you can't get them out. I think without taking the power supply, I think you take the front off, and I think this releases out the front. So you could potentially get 4 hard drives in here. There's room for a laptop size CD or DVD, whatever drive at the top, so your optical drive. But it looks like there's 2 power connectors there, and then another 2 more there for those drives. There doesn't appear to be any way to get power to a graphics card, so I don't think you'd be able to run a very high-end graphics card off of one of these systems. And I say that because this is one of these boards that uses a 12 volt only power supply, so I thought she'll show up, but on here we've got 2 12 volt rails, and then we've got a 12 volt standby, but there's nothing else. There's no 5 volts or 3 volts or anything like that, like you would get on a standard ATX power supply. The 3 volts and the 5 volt are actually generated on the motherboard, So down here there's probably some circuitry that does that. So we've got our 12 volt feed here coming from the power supply. So I'm going to take all of this out, so I might as well start disconnecting. Then on the motherboard down here there's another connector. If I can get that out. It's a funny looking one. That's actually not an input to the board, it's an output from the board to this little sort of mini SATA power wiring loom. And that's what gives you your power to your drives. This is a socket 1150. I think this comes with a crappy G3220 processor on it, which is just a dual core 3 GHz. Not a very good thing. But I think you can install up to something like a 4690 on this, which is actually a reasonably good processor for just general use, certainly for internet browsing. It's more than good enough. I use something slightly less than that for my main Linux Mint system, and it's perfectly adequate. The other thing with this board is you've got the 4 memory slots as well, so with the silly prices at the minute of a lot of the second-hand stuff, especially like DDR3 RAM's gone up ridiculous price-wise. You could get hold of some of the smaller RAM chips, perhaps some 4s, and still have 16 gig of RAM because you've got the slots to accommodate it. So I was saying that the power supply's split over 2 rails, so I would assume that one of the rails is for the processor, because that still uses the standard 4-pin processor power connector. And the power supply, I think, is just, yeah, it's just standard screws, and this is a standard MATX layout for the screws on the back as well. I'm just going to remove that. And there's actually a little clip thing down here, a spring-loaded piece of metal that helps keep the power supply retained, which is quite nice. A bit more support. I didn't really show the back of this. It's nothing special. Difficult to see on here, but just a standard I/O shield, and yeah, the 4 slots for your standard micro ATX. I think this fan is a 90mm fan on the back. I don't think it's an 80. It looks a bit bigger than an 80 to me, and that's rubber mounted, which is nice. It's also got 4 wires and a 5-pin connector. I don't know if that's a Dell specific thing. I don't know if there's a temperature sensor on there as well, because normally you get 3 wires, but so I've just balanced this on here because I wanted to see if this would still post in the BIOS without this other fan connector, which it does, but I don't know whether I'll keep that on or not at the minute. I'm going to leave that alone for the time being, I think. There's a chassis intrusion switch here. Don't really have any interest in one of those, so that can stay with the board. We've got some SATA cables. These seem to be very tight. They've not got latches on, they're just a tight fit. And the SATA cable. This board does have USB 2 and USB 3. I think the USB 3 ports are not marked as blue ports, they're super speed ports, I think they're marked as. They're definitely USB 3 because you can, there's some on the front as well, they're the same. They look like the USB 2 ports, but they are USB 3. Now this has got a clip on it, this USB 3 port. I've not seen one with a metal clip like that, a retainer, which is a good idea because these are quite, they don't stay in the socket very well, I find. A bit like the old SCART leads. This has also got a weird retaining mechanism on it as well. Probably isn't going to show up. You have to squeeze the outer edges to release it. So that's a non-standard USB 1 header, unfortunately. It's the fine pin pitch, very similar to the USB 3 actually. Same pitch, same pin pitch. so that's a bit of a pain. Yeah, not sure what that's going to mean in terms of trying to get rid of the board, but we'll see. Because I want to be able to sort of try and sell this board on, and the power supply and other bits. It'd be nice if this could just be reused in any old system, because I think the mounting layouts are standard. Again, it's standard micro ATX by the looks of things, I think. I will check that, because I've been caught out with all these things a few times. This is a front panel connector, and again this is a custom connector, but I will probably just remove the power button and that and replace it with a standard one of some sort. I think this is actually a power button with a built-in LED. I only recently discovered these little, they're like the normal tactile push button switches, but then they have an LED bridged across and 2 extra connectors. So I found a place on eBay to get them, but again there's like a lot of things that are from China, so you've got to wait ages to get them sometimes. Well, sometimes they're really quick, but... So I'm just going to strip this out of it. Oh yeah, before I carry on, I've just remembered that I noticed this before. There's a little widget at the front here. I didn't know what it was at first. Thought it might be an LED or a button or something. Again, you might not be able to see with this. I've not got the really big zoom on at the minute. But in there's something that looks a little bit like a transistor, but I think it's an I2C temperature sensor. There's a particular number for them, but I can't remember what the number is. You just see the back of it there. So I think that's just a temperature sensor, so they're probably monitoring the ambient airflow into the case, the temperature of that, to then also adjust the speed of the fans relative to that as well, not just the processor temperature. I'm hoping this isn't screwed down to the back panel where the processor is and it's just got a plate. But there's another one there. Not doing very well today with these screws. I think it was the Pentium 4s where they used to be able to screw the processor heatsink mount directly to the back plate, which I actually think was a really good idea, because it meant all the strain of the weight was taken by the back panel and none of it was taken through the board itself. But then they moved away from that again. So yeah, so we've got a bunch of bits here. I'll pop out this I/O shield. So I've just grabbed a standard micro ATX motherboard, which by chance happens to be a Pentium 4. I'm not putting this in here, this is probably a board that doesn't even work anymore. I just want to double check all the mounting points are right, which they are. So I'm not too keen on this idea down here though. And they've not put a, well, there isn't a support in that part of the board normally anyway, but they've put a support, a little metal tab that sticks up. I shall point out down here, but there's a real potential for that to short out on the bottom of a motherboard, so I don't think that's a particularly good idea. Obviously it's designed to take a specific Dell board. They don't build them for other things. So where would that be? So that'd be over here. So you see there's a few bits here that could potentially short out on along this part of the board. So yeah, another thing to watch out for in reusing these Dell and other manufacturers' cases and things and boards and power supplies and all of it. So this front panel should just theoretically unclip by doing that. And nothing's attached to this, which is quite nice. And you can see there, it's quite a nice run of ventilation on that. And we've got this thing here. See, I'd like to leave that on just because there's no real reason to remove that. Not that I'm going to use them, but at the same time we've got this stupid custom USB 2 header, so it would be nice to put this with the board, keep it with the board. So I'll have a look at it. There's a screw on the front for this, holding it in. I think it'll just be a case of figuring out how to hot shot it out. Yeah, I don't know how that's. There's again some clips, so just bend them up. There's a few of them as well. 3. Oh, 5. There's 2 on the other side. I really don't want this to come out unintentionally. I thought that might be moulded then, but it's not. It's clipped as well. As fast as you undo one side, the other side closes up again. Extremely annoying. Don't think there are clips there. Oh, there's some more here hidden. Oh, that's just wired straight into everything, so yeah, so I didn't know if there'd be a plug that you could disconnect this wire if it had a standard USB 2 header pin thing the other end. So I'm not sure whether I'll leave that with it or not, because I can always, so I say I'm not interested in, for what I want to do with this, I'm not really interested in this. So I could put some black plastic behind there and you block the holes up. It seems a bit of a shame though. And there's like a little removable thing here for the CD drive, so that's how you put your laptop drive through. So that's just a blanking plate. So the power button it's got like a translucent power button symbol on it, so there'll be the power button, there'll actually be an LED in here. So I need to remove that. Not sure what's holding that in place. Metal clip tucked right down in the corner. It's extremely difficult to get at. Bend that up. Hops the wire out of the way. That should be it now. That should come through. There you go. Yeah, so you've got a clicky kind of tactile switch, but then there's an LED in the middle of that. I think they kind of fit a normal clicky button as well, but whether I can get this out without damaging it, it's another story. There we go. I actually think I'm trying to undo the wrong bit. I think these clips are for when it's in the other piece of plastic, and I think they're clips I want are actually down the side here, if they even are clips. I don't know. I'll leave that out for now. And I've just got like a blanking plate on the front for that. But I think this is like a removable bay. Yeah, so that's actually got all of it on. That's got your CD-ROM mount and everything. 2 extra hard drives. So, I mean, with what I've got in mind for this whole thing's going to have to come out, but that in itself is going to pose a whole number of problems that it's going to create. But again, that's not really for this particular video. Yeah, there's not really a lot more to this. This doesn't come out, it's just these slide out. This is riveted in. And you've got your quick release thing for the card slots at the back. I never really like this. I prefer to put screws in, but they're not even threaded now, so you can't even put screws through if you want to, which is, I find it a bit annoying really, but yeah. So I shall just put this back in for now. I've got no real benefit from removing it. And look on here, they've also got all this little selection of screws, which I think are for the laptop drive, so at least you've got the appropriate sort of screws available if you need them. And a big screw there, I think that's just part of the mounting mechanism that just locks into part of the chassis. I shouldn't really have had to undo those screws. Perhaps I didn't need to. No, I didn't need to undo those screws at all. I didn't think that I would. But. So that's that really, a big mess. I shall just put the case back together. I want to keep the board and the power supply and some of the cables separate, keep them out. I'll keep these bits together because that does really, the power cable does belong with the board really. And these other bits. I'm not sure what I'll do with the USB side of things. I probably will include that, and maybe even the power button. I can always I can install any old thing into there really. Wouldn't be that difficult. So yeah, that's that.